At the outset, I'd like to just introduce you Prime Minister Khan's visit to Miyagi Prefecture this morning and afternoon. Prime Minister Khan left Haneda for Matsushima base this morning, and he moved on to Ishinomaki city. He visited Ishinomaki city office, where he met with the Miyagi governor, the mayor of Ishinomaki, and mayor of Higashi Matsushima, and mayor of Onnagawa town. And then he visited the affected areas, including including his visit to evacuation center, which was Ishinomaki Commercial High School of Commerce. And then he moved on to the Self-Defense Forces Tohoku chapter, which is located inside Sendai, and met with the officers in charge, and he in fact met with Commanding General Eiji Kimizuka, who is Superintendent General of Tohoku chapter of Ground Self-Defense Forces, and he's also joined by General Ryoichi Oriki. He's the Joint Chief of Self-Defense Forces. He was also met by commander of U.S. Pacific Fleet, Admiral Patrick Walsh, and he was Prime Minister himself could encounter the actual site of Operation Tomodachi, conducted by U.S. forces in Tohoku area. And so this was a very precious occasion for Prime Minister to be able to actually feel how Operation Tomodachi by U.S. forces has been conducted. At the evacuation center that I mentioned in Ishinomaki, there were calls from those people who are staying at the evacuation centers, saying such as "Gambaro Ishinomaki, Gambaro." Let's keep up, and those people are from fishing industry. And the Prime Minister had occasions to listen to various voices from those who are at the center. And also when he visited near the fishing ports of Ishinomaki city, Prime Minister himself was telling those people who are engaged in fishing activities that, I quote, "It is very important to repair ports, and he would like to extend his utmost support for resumption of coastal fishing." And also and after that he went to the studio of Radio Ishinomaki, where there are information transmitted on disaster-related information. and the Prime Minister himself mentioned that in order to make Ishinomaki better for the future, let's try to recreate a new city, and we'll never let the people in Ishinomaki being isolated. As I mentioned, this is the third time that Prime Minister visits affected areas, and of course, the first one was visiting Fukushima Daiichi the morning after by helicopter, and also other areas affected, by tsunami from the air. And the second time was his visit to Rikuzen Takata City last week. Of course, even if we talk about one word, affected or afflicted areas, depending on the locations and timing, there are different necessities. So it is deemed important for Prime Minister to actually see what's going on in those local areas. So this concludes my initial remarks, and I'd like to now ask Mr. Nishiyama to go next.
Thank you, Mr. Shikata. I'd like to brief the most recent status of the Fukushima Daiichi power plant. Regarding Unit 1, we are steadily injecting nitrogen to the regarding Unit 1, we are steadily injecting nitrogen to the containment vessel of the Unit 1. We see an increase of the pressure of the vessel, but we understand the reason is the nitrogen injection. So this is, we think, normal. There may be some leak from the vessel, but so far we see no substantive changes at monitoring posts. With respect to the stagnant water in the turbine building of the Unit 1, we have been transferring the water from the hot well to the condensate storage tank so that we can pump the stagnant water up in the hot well. I think we are ready for this action. Regarding Unit 2, parameters of the reactor are relatively stable. Regarding spent fuel pool, we introduced 60 tons of pure water to the spent fuel pool of the Unit 2. As for stagnant water, we'll first transfer the water in the trench attached to the Unit 2 to the hot well by setting a pump at the vertical part of that trench. Our agency, NISA, is now checking the safety of this action. And actually, the level of the water in the trench went up by 1 centimeter within a half day. Separately, we will duly implement measures to enclose the space where the highly radiated stagnant water may flow in, the space of part of the sea. The measures, as I explained earlier, these days, silt fences, steel plates, and sand-filled bags. Regarding Unit 3, parameters of the reactor are relatively stable. Regarding spent fuel pool, we are throwing pure water to the spent fuel pool of the Unit 3 this evening with concrete pumping machine starting 5:15 p.m. As for stagnant water, we have not found any causes of the fact that the water surface level is increasing in hot well. This issue is to be solved before we begin transferring the water from the turbine building to the hot well. Regarding Unit 4, we threw 90 tons of pure water with concrete pumping machine yesterday. Regarding Unit 5 and 6, we are almost finished the releasing the slightly radiated underground water from the subdrain pit to the sea. In addition to those things which happened regarding those individual plants, we are releasing the slightly radiated water from the radiation waste disposal system to the sea. The remaining amount is very small, and we will finish it very soon. After we release the water in this radiation waste disposal system, we will bring the highly radiated water in the trench next to the turbine building of the Unit 2. Our agency will again confirm the safety of the way how the water is transferred and stored. And, we sprayed synthetic plastic to settle the radiated dust over the ground also today. Last night, TEPCO announced the result of the research on the March 11 tsunami. In summary, at Fukushima Daiichi, the tsunami was 14 to 15 meters above the average water surface water level of Onahama Bay, and the depth of the water in the Fukushima Daiichi was 4 to 5 meters. That's all for my report today. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to ask Mr. Matsunaga of Foreign Ministry to go next.
Thank you, Mr. Shikata. Good evening. I'd like to this evening report about the special ASEAN-Japan ministerial meeting which was convened in Jakarta yesterday. The foreign ministers of ASEAN and Japan and their representatives met in Jakarta yesterday for the special ASEAN-Japan ministerial meeting in response to the devastating impact of the recent earthquake and tsunami. This was a historical occasion for Japan and ASEAN. The special meeting was addressed by the President of the Republic of Indonesia, who inter alia underlined its importance as a reflection of solidarity between Japan and ASEAN in addressing natural disasters. He emphasized the effective and timely response to natural disasters of such a magnitude require a coordinated and coherent approach. He also emphasized the need to further enhance the capacity for disaster preparedness and management by building upon the existing mechanism and frameworks. Prime Minister Kan sent a message through Foreign Minister Matsumoto to express his deep gratitude to the warm support from ASEAN, and the message was appreciated by the ASEAN state members. The foreign ministers of ASEAN and their representatives expressed their sympathy, solidarity, and support to the government and people of Japan in their recovery and reconstruction efforts. They were confident of the early reconstruction of Japan. They expressed their appreciation for Japan's general support, which has been contributing to the development of ASEAN countries, and also expressed their strong expectation that Japan will continue to contribute to the development and stability of the region. They further expressed their determination to reciprocate by rendering their assistance and support to Japan. Foreign Minister Matsumoto deeply appreciated the warm support for Japan from the ASEAN member states and people, and briefed the foreign ministers of ASEAN and their representatives on the latest developments, as well as Japan's determination to overcome the aftermath of the disaster and achieving early recovery. On the nuclear power plant accident, Foreign Minister Matsumoto appreciated ASEAN countries' high level-headed response. He explained that in order to bring the situation under control, the government of Japan has been tackling with the matter with advice and cooperation of IAEA and others. He also explained that the radiation level in atmosphere has been decreasing gradually and has become nearly normal, and that such international organizations as ICAO, IMO, and WHO have been announcing their objective assessment of the situation, stating that there is no need for travel restrictions and other excessive measures. Recognizing that the issue of nuclear power plant is a matter of interest of the entire international community, Foreign Minister Matsumoto explained that Japan would share the knowledge and experience gained from the present accident with utmost transparency with ASEAN countries and the international community as a whole, with a view to contributing to strengthening safety of nuclear power generation. With respect to food of Japanese origin, Foreign Minister Matsumoto explained that the government of Japan has established relevant provisional regulation values and taken measures such as halting the shipping from the areas concerned with a view to ensuring the distribution of safe food. He requested ASEAN countries to respond to the situation rationally, based on scientific reasoning, taking into consideration the measures taken by the Japanese government and the information it provides. ASEAN countries appreciated Mr. Matsumoto's detailed explanation and assured him that ASEAN countries continues to respond to the situation in a level-headed manner. It was also noted that with the increasing economic interdependence between Japan and ASEAN, the recovery and early reconstruction of Japan, as well as the economic growth in ASEAN, are mutually important. On the issue of future cooperation regarding disaster prevention, Mr. Matsumoto proposed to further strengthen the cooperation in this field between Japan and ASEAN countries. Specifically, he proposed hosting a seminar by the end of this year where possible in order to share experience of and lessons learned from the Great East Japan earthquake with a view to achieving concrete outcomes. Supporting ASEAN Coordinating Center for Humanitarian Assistance on Disaster Management through not only provision of communication equipments and assisting the development of stockpiling, but also dispatch of relevant personnel. And also having regular training to enhance capacity of the region's rescue teams and holding ARF disaster response exercise. I invite you to refer to the chair's summary of the special meeting that was released after the special meeting. On the outcomes of the meeting, the chair's summary states that following extensive discussions among them, the foreign ministers of ASEAN and Japan and their representatives welcomed the holding of the special meeting, which reflects the strong and special ties that bind ASEAN and Japan from the leaders' level to people's level, recalled Japan's unwavering support of ASEAN member states when natural disaster struck, and underscore the firm commitment of ASEAN member states to support the relief, recovery, and reconstruction process in Japan in response to Japan's request. Noted heartfelt support from ASEAN member states, especially the public and civil societies, extended to the people affected by the earthquake and tsunami in Japan. Reaffirmed their commitment to propose ASEAN-Japan future cooperation in disaster management, being cognizant of their geographical vulnerability to natural disasters, and welcome Japan's resolve to further strengthen its support for ASEAN in the efforts to promote and enhance capability in disaster management. And further, they underlined the need to strengthen such cooperation through, among others, sharing of experience and lessons learned, including the Great East Japan earthquake, ensuring prompt and smooth communications in times of disaster, enhancing coordination mechanism to facilitate the flow of support in a timely manner, as well as conducting training and capacity building program for disaster preparedness, emergency response, relief, and reconstruction efforts. And they stressed the need to further strengthen existing disaster management cooperation under the various regional mechanisms, including the ASEAN-Japan Strategic Partnership, ASEAN +3, East Asia Summit, and the ASEAN Regional Forum, including the periodic holding of disaster relief exercise, which I mentioned earlier. They also emphasized the importance of the full implementation of the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response and the operationalization of the nearly normal operationalization of the training scheme. So that's all for me. That's all from my.
Now,
thank you.
We'd like to open the floor for questions. Please identify yourself when you ask a question. Andy?
All right, first, just Andy Pollack with the New York Times. Andy Pollack with the New York Times. Mr. Nishiyama, just on today's developments, could you explain a little bit more about, you say there might be some leak in the containment of number one, and I understand maybe you're slowing down your nitrogen or you're abandoning your goal of how much nitrogen you might put in. Why is that? Because of the leak, or why is that? And also, the news agencies here are reporting that you expect to finish the release of all the 11,500 tons of lightly radioactive water into the ocean should be finished tonight. Is that still the plan, or we don't know when it will be finished?
ニューヨークタイムズのポラックですけれども、西山さんにお尋ねします。本日の動きに関してもう少しご説明をいただきたいんですけれども、先ほどのお話では1号機の格納容器に何らかの漏れがあるかもしれなくて、窒素の注入を少し落としていると、速度を落としていると。これはその漏れがあるがゆえに、当初予定していた量の窒素を入れるという目標を断念したということでしょうか。それと本日の報告では今夜には低レベル放射性の排水11,500トンの海への排水をすべて完了すると予想されると いう報告がありましたけれども、今でもその計画通りに進んでいるんでしょうか。それとも今現在ではいつ、低レベルの放射性排水の海への放出が完了するかわからないという状況なんでしょうか。
まず窒素の封入については、もともと6日ぐらいかけて、6000立方メートルを封入しようとしておりました。それでゆっくり入れてってるわけですけれども、圧力の上がり方を見ると、やはり少しリークがあるのではないかと思っています。でこのことについてはもともと水素が爆発の原因となった水素が漏れたり放射性廃棄物が漏れたりしたので、リークがあるということは想定しておりましたけれどもそれが、確認されたような状態になっています。
First of all, regarding the injection of nitrogen, in the first place, we were trying to inject the nitrogen very slowly at a rate of 6,000 cubic meters over a period of 6 days or so. But when we saw how the pressure was rising, we thought perhaps there may be a small leak. And to begin with, because of the leak of hydrogen, which it caused, because of the leakage of the hydrogen and also the leakage of radioactive material, we had assumed there might be some leakage. And I think it means that our assumption has been confirmed.
Can I just clarify that? So you're, okay, when you said this, I thought you said the leak was in the containment vessel, so that when you're putting nitrogen in, maybe the nitrogen's leaking out. But this leak doesn't sound like that. It sounds like you're talking about a leak from the reactor pressure vessel into the containment vessel.
ちょっと今の点確認なんですけれども、先ほどのお話では格納容器に漏れがあるので窒素を噴入するともしかしたら窒素が漏れるかもしれないというお話だったと思うんですけれども、というのは圧力容器から格納容器への漏れがあるというふうには聞こえなかったんですけれども。
今私が申し上げたのは格納容器の漏れでありまして、それでこれまでの水素とか放射性物質の漏れを考えると圧力容器もそれから格納容器も両方ともに多少のリークがあると思っています。
Yes, I was talking about the leak from the containment vessel. And when we consider the leakage of hydrogen and leakage of radioactive material that we have seen so far, we consider that there is probably a small leakage both in the pressure vessel as well as the containment vessel.
それで今窒素の入れる量については今どんどん窒素を出すとリークを窒素のリークをさせるために入れてるわけではもちろんなくて酸素を抑える形で、その爆発的な燃焼にならないようにそういう範囲で入れていくという方針です。
And regarding the amount of nitrogen that will be injected, obviously we are not injecting the nitrogen just to have it leak out. So it is our policy to inject nitrogen to the extent that it will be able to keep down the level of oxygen so that we will not have any explosive combustion.
それから低レベルの海への放水についてはこれは我々の予測では今晩中に、終了したという報告が、できるのではないかと思っていますけれどもこのことについては 周りの国とか日本の、漁業の関係者とか自治体の、住民の方々とかですね、自治体の方々などに非常に心配をかけていますので、そういう方々にもし終了した場合にはしっかり報告をしてもらいたいと思っています。東京電力から報告をしてもらいたいと思っています。
Regarding the release of low-level radiated water into the sea, we foresee that we will be able to receive a report of completion of that operation during tonight. And since this is a matter that caused a great concern to the neighboring countries, the Japanese fisheries community, the local governments, and the residents, I wish to have TEPCO make sure to report to these people when they are finished with the releasing of the low radiated water into the sea.
それから外国の政府に対しては日本の政府からもそのことを報告する必要があると思っています。
And I also consider that the Japanese government needs to report that fact to the foreign governments also.
Next question, please.
Someone else wants to ask a question. I don't want to know.
Okay, Ken, go ahead. Yeah.
Likewise. Let me follow up on some of the negative effects if this doesn't work. If there is an explosion, if the nitrogen doesn't work and the oxygen and hydrogen combine, what is your forecast for what that would mean in terms of the spread of radiation in general? And could it put Tokyo at risk? Could it put the Tokyo water supply at risk? Thank you.
エコノミストの方ですけれども、一つ関連質問なんですけれども、もし今おっしゃった窒素の注入がうまくいかなかった場合に何らかのマイナスの効果があるんでしょうか。すなわち、もし窒素の注入がうまくいかなくて、そして酸素と水素が結合して爆発が起こった場合に、一般論として放射能の拡散という意味ではどういったことが起こると予想されていますでしょうか。そうなった場合には東京および東京の水道水などに対してリスクがあるのでしょうか。
これについてはこの窒素の、注入を始める前に東京電力にそれを評価させて、我々NISAとしてもそれを確認しております。
Before beginning the injection of the nitrogen, we had Tokyo Electric Power Company make an assessment of that, and our organization NISA has also confirmed it.
でその結果によれば爆発が水素の爆発的な燃焼が起こって、それに伴って、放射性物質が排出されたとしても今現在の20キロ30キロの避難範囲を変える必要はないという結論になっています。
And according to the results of that assessment, the conclusion that has been reached was even if there is a explosive combustion of the hydrogen and the accompanying release of radioactive material, there would be no need to change the current evacuation area of 20 kilometers and 30 kilometers.
東京の水道についてはちょっと予測が難しいところがありますけれども
Uh,
それほど大きな影響はないというふうに思っています。
Regarding the drinking water in Tokyo, it is somewhat difficult to predict, to make any prediction regarding the drinking water in Tokyo, but we consider that there would not be a major effect.
Oh, Yamaguchi-san, do you have?
All right. Just on, you say the parameters are stable, and I've actually looked, and the parameters have been stable for a long time. Aren't you supposed to be cooling the reactor down? It seems like, at best, you're keeping it from going up, but the temperature seems to be the same day after day. How long do you have to keep doing this before it's over, and what is the goal line here? And at that time that you achieve the goal line, how much water will have accumulated in the plant, how much radioactive water will have to be disposed of?
またニューヨーク・タイムズのポラックですけれども、パラメーターは安定しているとおっしゃいましたけれども、私が見た限りではパラメーターはもうずいぶん長い間ずっと安定して、おります。そして原子炉の冷却をずっとしているということなんですけれども、せいぜい原子炉の温度が上がるのをなんとか食い止めているだけで、原子炉の温度はもうずっと日を追うごとに同じ水準でとどまっているように思うんです。原子炉の冷却をしているとおっしゃっている割には。ですのでこれが全部収束するまでにあとどのぐらいの期間、どのぐらいの長さ今のようなことを続けなければいけないのか、そして、実際に目標とする水準に達成するまでにあとどのぐらいの水をさらに注入しなきゃいけないのか、あとどのぐらいの水をさらに蓄積していかなきゃいけないのか、そして実際に最終的な目標に到達するまでにはあとどのぐらいの放射能を帯びた水を処理しなければならないのでしょうか。
確かに今の冷却の方式、ただ単に水を入れるだけの冷却の方式では相当長くかかると思います。
By the current approach to cooling of just injecting water, it is true that it is probably going to take a considerably long time.
で我々が目指しているのはこのたまり水を処理しながら、なんとか持続可能な冷却システムを作り上げるということです。
Our goal is to dispose of the stagnant water and be able to create a sustainable cooling system.
でこれがどういうものであるかということは今ここで申し上げるのは非常に難しいぐらい関係者の間で今煮詰めているところです。
And what that is going to look like is now being narrowed down and boiled down by those concerned to the extent that it's still difficult for me to describe what it's going to be like.
で要素として、我々が考えている要素としては一つは今入れている水をどんどん次から新しい水を入れていくということではなく何らかの循環するシステムを作りたいということが一つの発想です。
But some of the elements that we have in mind would be one, the idea of creating some kind of a circulating system for supplying the water rather than just injecting new water as we are doing now.
それからその循環させる間にできれば何らかの冷却のシステム、海水を使ったりあるいは空気を使ったりする冷却のシステムを入れたいと思います。
And somewhere in that circulating process, if possible, we wish to include some kind of a cooling system which uses either seawater or the air.
それからもう一つはその放射能をある程度減衰させるための、そういうなんていうか部分もそのサイクルといいますか循環の中に盛り込めたらいいと思います。
And another idea would also be to include some mechanism that can attenuate the radiation as part of that circulating system.
それでそういう持続可能なシステムが出来上がれば現在のやり方よりははるかに短い時間で冷却することができると思いますけれども、今それがその何ヶ月先なのかというようなことについて申し上げるのはちょっと難しいと思います。
And once we are able to create such a sustainable system, we will be able to cool the reactor in far shorter time than we are taking now. But it's difficult for me to say at this point in time how many months that is going to take.
Okay.
Very interesting in your response that you said that you're looking for some sort of mechanism to attenuate the radiation as part of the circulating system. What do you mean by attenuate the radiation? Can you describe first what you mean by that and what is the technology behind that? Generally, because I'm a generalist.
先ほどのお答えの中で、その循環システムの一環として、放射能を減衰させるメカニズムを導入したいとおっしゃいましたけれども、それはどういう意味なんでしょう。あとどういうふうなその技術が背景にあるんでしょうか。私は素人なので
基本的にはフィルターだとか樹脂とかでですね取るということですけれども、今例えばフランスのアレバ社なんかが非常に高い優れたノウハウを持っていると聞いてますので、そういうところとも相談をしています。
Basically, it will mean to remove the radiation by using a filter or some kind of a resin. And we are told, for example, that companies such as Areva of France have very advanced high-level know-how regarding such operation. So we are discussing them with such companies.
I had not realized that there was a mechanism whereby you could actually remove radiation from the water. How could is this technology very costly? Would it apply to, is that how you intend to eventually store, kind of clean and then store or dispose of the radiation, the many hundreds of tons of highly radiated water that you're storing now?
水に含まれる放射能を除去するメカニズムがあるということは認識していませんでしたけれども、この技術というのはコスト的に高いんでしょうか。そして、現在貯蔵されている、何百トンという高レベル放射能を帯びた水をそのような形でなんでクリーンにし貯蔵し処理するおつもりなんでしょうか。
あの今まさにフィルターとか樹脂とかで、ある程度の濃度にして、下げて、それからまた蒸発させて蒸留して、さらにまた取るとかですね、放射能を取るとか、そういったことで、段階的に処理することによって、実用的なシステムとして実現できると我々は思っています。でまたそれでできた水はもう一回冷やす方に使うということ、あるいは、別の用途に使うということもあるかもしれません。
Right now, we are precisely using filter and resin to reduce the radiation to a certain level of concentration. And then perhaps we can distill the waters after that to further remove radiation. And we consider that we will be able to use this kind of treatment step by step. I mean, we believe we can use this kind of step-by-step treatment for actually disposing of the radiated water, and we may be able to use that water again after the treatment for cooling or for some other purpose.
Just on the water issue, I guess I'm still a little confused. I mean, this is some basic questions, but how much water, radioactive water, is there now at the plant? And what happens, I mean, what happens to the water? It goes into the reactor vessel. I assume it's not leaking out of the bottom, so it should be filling up the reactor vessel, but it doesn't seem like the reactor vessel is filling up any higher than it used to be. So is that water just being evaporated and you keep putting in more? Is that what's happening?
またニューヨーク・タイムズですけど、水のことですけれども、ちょっと依然混乱してまして、基本的な質問かもしれませんけれども、今発電所あるいは原子炉の中には、放射能を帯びた水がどのぐらいあるんでしょうか。そして、リアクターベセルですが、圧力容器ですかね、圧力容器の中に入れられた水はどこに行っているんでしょうか。下から漏れているわけではないと思うんですが、でもそれにしては圧力本来だったら下から漏れていないのであれば圧力容器が水で満たされるはずなのに、水で満たされている様子もないということは、蒸発どんどん蒸発していってしまうから、また後から水をどんどん入れているということなんでしょうか。
はい、まず水の量は正確に分かりませんけれども、非常にラフに、見積もってみるとたまり水はだいたい3つの合気について1つにつき、2万トンぐらいあるというふうに考えられています。
First of all, I do not know for sure the amount of water that we have, but if I may give you a rough estimate, for the 3 units, we would assume that there is approximately 20,000 tons of stagnant water for each of the 3 units.
だからこれについては2号機が一番放射能濃度が高くて、それ以外のものはそれよりある程度低い値になっています。
And unit number 2 has the highest radiation concentration, highest concentration of radioactivity, and the other units have only a lower concentration of radioactivity.
それで水のルートは主に圧力容器の中に入れられたものが、蒸気の形で、おそらくは蒸気の形で、格納容器の中にリークして、でそれが格納容器の中で水に変わっていくという 形になり、それで格納容器から例えば2号機の場合にはサプレッションチェンバーのところに穴が開いている可能性が高いので、そこなどからリークしているというふうに考えられます。
And regarding the route that the water is following, the water that is injected, first of all, into the pressure vessel is probably leaking into the containment vessel in the form of vapor, and it gradually becomes water inside the containment vessel. And for instance, in the case of unit number 2, the possibility is high that it is leaking through a hole that is assumed to be in the suppression chamber.
でもう一つ水の量について申し上げれば、現在の1機あたりの、注入量はだいたい1時間に6から7立方メートルであります。
And also, to give you some more information regarding the amount of water, currently the amount of water that is injected would be between 6 to 7 cubic meters per hour for each unit.
山口さん。
すいません、AP 通信の山口ですけれども、たまり水のことに関連してちょっとお尋ねをしたいんですが、その水が発生してから本来のその冷却を取り戻すという活動が一旦、中止というか続けられることができなくなっていると思うんですけれども、これはその間にその炉心の状態がちゃんとその思ったように保てているのか、水量も例えば燃料棒の多分半分ぐらいまでしか今まだ来ていないと思うんですけれども、ということは一部露出している状態がずっと続いている、ということであれば燃料の状態が良くない時間がそんな伸びているのか、その辺は大丈夫なんでしょうか。それからたまり水処理は予想されたぐらいのペースで進んだのか、あるいは思ったより時間がかかっているということであれば、それは線量の高いせいなのか、他に理由があれば教えていただけますでしょうか。
I am Yamaguchi from AP. I have a question in relation to the stagnant water. I believe that ever since the stagnant water was found, you have had to temporarily suspend or were not able to continue with the work of restoring the cooling system. And are you being able to maintain the state of the reactor core during that period of time? The level of the water is only enough probably to cover about half of the fuel rod. And if it is true that a part of the fuel rod has not been submerged in water over this period of time, it would mean that the fuel rod has been placed in a situation that is not very favorable for a longer period of time, and doesn't that cause any difficulties? And also, are you being able to dispose of the stagnant water as you had expected, or is it taking a longer period of time because of the highly radiated water that has been found, or for any other reason?
まず 燃料の状態は一種のその均衡状態、平衡状態、エクイリブリアムの状態にあると思います。ですから悪くはなっていないと思いますし、そのことはモニタリングポストの値が悪くなっていないということによって示されていると思っています。
First of all, I believe that the state of the fuel is maintaining a kind of equilibrium, and it has not become worse. And this is indicated by the fact that the values that are measured at the monitoring post have not become worse.
それで新しい放射性物質の、追加の放出というのはほとんどないと思っておりますし、それから残留熱もある程度減衰してきている、少なくなってきていると思っています。
And also, we do not believe there is hardly any additional release of new radioactive material, and the residual heat is also declining.
でたまり水についてはこれを処理する場所の確保に若干のその手間がかかっていて、特に当てにしていた場所が他にリークしてしまうようなことが発見されたりして、それでこういう緊急やむを得ない低レベルのものをその代わりに放出することを余儀なくされたりとか、そういうことで思ったよりも時間がかかっていると思います。
And regarding the stagnant water, we are taking some time in finding a place to dispose of the stagnant water. And in particular, since we, for instance, found some leakage in the place that we had intended to dispose of the stagnant water, and as an emergency measure, we were faced with a situation where we had no choice but to release the low radioactive water into the sea. So the disposal of the stagnant water is taking more time than we had expected.
Okay, Ken?
Did you want to ask a follow-up, or are you?
I just wanted to make sure that follow up on the question about this cause that has been delayed in addition to the lack of facility, and has a high level of radiation part of the cause that has delayed the stagnant water treatment.
関連質問ですけれども、ちょっと正しく理解するための確認なんですけれども、そうしますと高濃度の放射の帯びた水の存在がたまり水の処理を遅らせているということでしょうか。
そうですね、高い濃度であるからその扱いが非常に難しいということ、移すのにも慎重にやらなきゃいけないということで時間がかかりますから、そういう意味では高濃度であることが遅れに影響していると思います。
Yes, that's correct. Since the water that we found has a high level of radioactive concentration, we are having difficulty in handling it, and we have to be careful even for merely transferring the water, and this is taking time. So the fact that the water has a high concentration of radioactivity is affecting the work and is becoming a cause of the delay.
Okay, last question, please.
Thanks. I have two very simple questions as the last question. I'll ask both at the same time. The first one is, you referred to the study in which the water of the tsunami was 14 to 15 meters above normal. And then you said that there was the water of 4 to 5 meters of depth. I didn't fully understand the difference between the tsunami height and then the depth of water. Second part to that is, what was the design, if you recall, what was the design specification for the Fukushima Daiichi plant? What had they built their preparedness for? And I will not ask the second question because Shikata-san will strangle me if I do.
最後の質問として2つ簡単な質問があるんですけれども、まず第一の質問としては、先ほどのお話で、一つの研究では、津波の高さが14から15メーターで深さが4メーターから5メーターっていうのというご報告があったんですけれども、その違いはどういうことなんでしょうか。それと福島第一原発の設計仕様はどういうものだったんでしょうか。すなわちどのぐらいのものに対応をするように建設されているのでしょうか。で2つ目の質問を聞くと四方さんに殺されそうなんでやめときます。
申し上げたのは、海から襲ってきた津波の高さは14から15メートルであって、それで浸水した水が一回溜まったその深さが4メートルから5メートルであったということです。
What I meant to say was that the height of the tsunami that came in from the sea was a height of 14 to 15 meters. And the depth of the area that was submerged in water was a depth of 4 to 5 meters.
それから設計上の想定していた津波は、確か 5.4 メートルとか 5.6 メートルとかそのぐらいの高さでした。
And the design specification for the tsunami was, I believe, a tsunami of a height of 5.4 or 5.6 meters, somewhere in that range.
この津波のレベルについては新しい指針ができて、それに基づいて、これから再度の見直しを行うまさにそういう時期に当たっていたんですけれども、その見直す前にこの大津波に襲われてしまったということでした。
And the level of the tsunami to be anticipated in the design specification was to be reviewed again based on the new guidelines that had been developed. But the tsunami has happened before the review was undertaken.
Okay, this concludes today's briefing. We will have a briefing at the Prime Minister's office tomorrow evening, probably around 7:30 or so, and possibly Mr. Edano may show up at the outset. Thank you.